I Feel Fine is a place where we have conversations we don't get to have enough because it's not usual to bring it up in our casual chats. The aim of Tatsam Collective is to build awareness for these topics for the modern corporate professionals. I always love having these conversations with people who I have known in different contexts, but never got the chance to have a deeper, meaningful conversation. Aditya is an old friend and the CFO for cleartrip.com. Earlier, he was in private equity in India and London with Goldman Sachs, TPG Capital, and Stanchart. In this episode, we talk about what it really means to thrive for him. What does it mean to burn out? What has worked with him in the past? And very interestingly, a CFO's perspective on why it makes sense to take care of employees' well-being. Not just because you are a large company, but especially when you are a startup. Aditya Agarwal on I Feel Fine. Let's dive in.
I think my first reaction was that, it got me thinking, right? So some of these topics are now becoming a little bit more common, more talked about in day-to-day professional lives, but a lot of them are not, right? A lot of them are still there at the surface. Subconsciously, people are probably thinking about these things. But yeah, sort of seeing that all in one place in print sort of definitely got me thinking, right? So that was sort of interesting.
Okay, I'm glad we got you thinking. Super kicked that, after many years we are talking and on such a topic. So thanks for coming, Aditya. And I've known you when you joined ClearTrip, I think, with your wife Divya. And actually, while I was doing the research, I had this thought that, oh my God, I should have got Divya along with you, because, she does bring so much perspective now from a working mom perspective, right? And that would be interesting, but we must get her on as well. So I will.
She's much tougher to get on. I can tell you, she's far busier as compared to me. So
I'll lure her with like expansion plans in Southeast Asia. Her and Ketika together. So it's going to be an Aeon Hewitt reunion. Yes, for sure. So your journey, over the last few years and your journey as a person and as a professional. Maybe I'll begin with the fact that, this whole community which we are building at Tatsam Collective is all about having a more reflective conversation, having that pause, having that a very deliberate view of life, where we are going and where we've come from. Given all of that, what do you think about the word thrive? When I talk about thriving in life, we talk about holistic well-being, we talk about thriving. What does it mean for you? What does it bring to your mind when I say that?
Yeah, I think for me, thriving is being happy, right? So if I'm happy, that is sort of my definition of thriving or definition of success in whatever I'm doing, right? Whether I'm going for a morning run, or if I'm spending time with kids, or I'm at work, right? If I'm happy in that moment, or in that period of time, right, over the last few days, weeks, months, then I'm thriving.
Have there been times where you felt that you were thriving? Have there been times where you felt you were not thriving? Was there any particular thing which stood out for you, like what makes you happy and what doesn't?
Yeah, I see all the time, right? I think there will always be occasions when you're not thriving, and there will be typically fewer occasions, right? Or fewer occasions that you'll identify as milestone moments, right? Where, okay, for example, you mentioned, I think just before we started the conversation, you were mentioning the Flipkart transaction with ClearTrip, right? So that was obviously a milestone moment, and it was a big moment of personal and professional satisfaction, right? So there will be these milestone moments. Similarly, in the personal life, there will be some milestones, right? Birthdays, anniversaries, birth of a child, etc. When the child does well at school, when you really feel proud of where things are. So those moments will always be few and far between, right? By their very nature. That's why they are milestone moments. But I would sort of say that I look at sort of being happy or thriving as sort of a ongoing state of affairs, right? That in general, if I am happy with the way things are, and there will always be many things that I'm not happy about, but in the larger scheme of things, I feel quite blessed. I feel quite happy with the way things are, and there's a lot of fortune involved in that, right? So I would say that yeah, if I take that as a definition, I've been thriving. Touch wood all my life.
Yeah. And we both grew up in South Asia, India, and it's interesting when you say that thriving is about happiness. And it made me think of my friends from other countries. And as parents, when we speak, their whole focus on their kids' well-being is about, are they happy? And it made me realize that I don't remember feeling that either as a parent or even when I was a child, that growing up in South Asia, there was a huge focus on, let's say, education, career. Of course, because given our India's history and all of the socioeconomic factors, how was your have these beliefs, what you shared about thriving and being happy, how have these been shaped or not shaped while you were growing up? What was the kind of conversation around you about happiness, well-being?
I think it's a very fair point. I think all around us, all around me, I mean, there is in a very competitive society, right? Like India, like in South Asia, you will find that people will define success or thriving in terms of academic achievements, in terms of professional achievements. So all of that happens, doesn't change, and even have to remind myself, right, that okay, for maybe happiness is beyond that, right? So that's one measure, one metric of thriving, but maybe not the sole metric. So just to coming back to your question, as I was growing up, I did not feel that pressure. I did not feel that pressure being put upon me by my parents or my family members or others around me. So maybe I was fortunate in that regard. I think it also helped that I was doing well academically. So maybe I can take some credit for that I maybe didn't attract that kind of pressure. But yeah, I mean, I did not feel that while growing up, but it has this realization has happened more, I think, in the, I would say, last decade or so, right? As professionally sort of we figured out our own paths and our own careers and our ways of life. I have come to realize, right, that okay, you may go to you may do very well academically, you may go to the best of institutions, you may work for the best of the companies, but that's not necessarily correlated with happiness and satisfaction. It may lead to it, it may not, and there are other parts also that may lead to it, right? So that is what has evolved my thinking into
Was there any particular incident or something? Because, all of us have had these moments or a gradual realization of things. Like, was there anything like that which you can recall, which made you shift the way to think, or was it always your definition of success similar,
It was not always, but I would say it's not like we've always thought about, right? What does success mean or what does happiness mean, right? It's typically you just go with the flow, and you never really get a chance to pause and think about, okay, what do you really want, right? But I would say that, see, having children definitely changes your perspective, right? You know that, I think, and that's probably, and that's also not just at that moment. I would say that having children and then spending time with them, seeing them grow and seeing them go to school and so on, that's when you start thinking about some of these things, right? That okay, what do you want for your child? And that's when you start thinking, okay, I really want them to be happy. I would say that's how I developed this.
Yeah. You talked about children, right? And a lot of conversation, which I personally think about, is the work-life harmony, and especially as a woman, as a working mom. What are your thoughts on that? And not just from a man-woman perspective, but just from any person who's leading things, he or she is an ambitious role professionally. How do you see a trade-off between that professional success and well-being and happiness? Or maybe you've not thought about it, but like, what do you think about it, if I were to just ask you this?
Yeah, there are always trade-offs, right? I think
how do you view
obviously I think there are maybe some people who can manage a very good balance and who maybe don't even feel that there is a trade-off, right? They are getting the best of everything. But I think there are always choices you make. There are always, I mean, for example, if I was uh, in a different job, or if I was stay-at-home dad, right, I would definitely be able to spend more time with my children, with my family, right, versus what I can do right now. So there are choices, there are trade-offs, and I think there is no one right, one size fits which fits for all, right? There's no one answer that fits for all. Uh, so I think as long as you know what are the reasons you are making a trade-off and you have made your peace with it, then it's fine, right? Then you don't see it as a trade-off. Okay, I know that I could spend this 1 hour uh, doing some important meetings, or I could spend this 1 hour spending some quality time with my family. But right now, for this reason, I've made that decision, and I think that's the right decision. Once I think it through like that, then I'm at peace with it, right? Then I don't feel any guilt or any regret, or I don't see it as a trade-off.
Given you and your wife Divya both are into extremely uh, I wouldn't say busy necessarily, but in jobs which require you to be sort of on, right? Always on. Are there any, so again, for working couples, what has worked for you guys, and you've got 2 kids, you both have ambitious, goals. What has worked for you? What has not worked?
Yeah, see, I think it
Just
is.
like, maybe people would be interested because a lot of working couples.
We're still trying to figure it out. Huh? So
yeah, everyone is, right? So yeah.
No, it is a stretch. And I think, see, in our societies and definitely in my family, I would still say that maybe a lot of the burden ends up falling on the lady in the house, right? So I would definitely say that my wife definitely takes a much more disproportionate share of managing the family, managing the children, as well as having a very, very demanding job, right? But yeah, I think in general, we both know that both these things are important to us. Our jobs and our professional lives are important to us, as well as our personal life and our family and our children are important to us. So I think maybe you end up making some other trade-offs, right? So maybe you end up doing a little less of something else that you used to do before you had children, maybe little less reading, a little less less sports, right? And you end up trying to optimize your time that way.
Yeah.
It is always a struggle, right? It's always a
choice
constant
making
struggle.
every day, every decision.
Yeah. 24 hours, not enough, obviously.
So shifting gears a little bit, Aditya, and just focusing on not just work-life balance, but specifically on mental well-being. So that's some collective actually focuses on holistic well-being, and a big part of that is mental well-being, because that affects everything. And again, everything is connected, your physical well-being, mental well-being, and all of that. But during the last 18 months, a lot of mental health issues have come to the forefront. So how have you observed your environment when it comes to mental health conversations? Do you feel that there is a stigma in the environment? And if yes, how does it show up? Any observations on that?
I think it's not very common, right? So it's not very common to hear people talk about mental health, at least in the day-to-day people you meet, right? In your, at least in my personal networks or in my professional networks. I think where I am seeing it become far more common is that in whatever you read, in news around you, globally, in sports teams and things like that, right? It's becoming far more common. And even there, I would say it's a sea change, right? Compared to when we were growing up, it was probably never have been accepted. And those conversations are becoming mainstream and people are recognizing that it is an issue which needs a lot of empathy. And so that is becoming far more commonplace. And I think people take their cues from that, right? So not necessarily explicit conversations around mental health being too common, but things like work-life balance, things like prioritizing family, prioritizing health, be it physical health, mental health. All of that is becoming, I think, far more common. I think there is no questions asked, right? When anybody in the company, in the organization, in the team says that they need time off for whatever reason, right? Be it for some family reasons or some health reasons, there is no stigma attached to that at all, right? I think everybody is very, very supportive. People say that absolutely get that fixed and come back whenever it's convenient, whenever it's appropriate, right? That is becoming, that is something that is, I think, changing for the better. I would still say that there is not very open discussion around an individual's mental health. That probably is still sort of a journey that we need to go through, right? As corporate India or as.
And it's interesting you spoke about the work work environment, because when people want to take off and things like that, there is a I wouldn't say debate, but like more like a discussion which has been going on, at least for people who work closely in this space for well-being culture of organizations, that whose responsibility is it? The primary onus for taking care of employees' mental health or individuals' well-being, does the onus lie with the individual or the manager, or let's say HR or overall leadership team? Given your experience with ClearTrip and also the fact that it was a tough 18 months for the travel industry, just generally, a couple of questions actually. So what do you think? What do you personally think about it in terms of the onus of this? And secondly, have you seen any tangible or observable shift? How open people were about this prior to this versus now?
Yeah, so I think the onus it's difficult to pin down, like where the primary onus lies. I think it lies on all of those stakeholders that you mentioned, right? I think the organization has to have that culture where people can feel free to surface these discussions. And that has to start right at the top, right? From the leadership level and from the HR level. So there's definitely an onus in that. Equally, and a manager plays a big role, right? That's the person that most employees will end up spending a lot of time to they see as their primary stakeholder in terms of managing their career. But yeah, I would say by and large, the onus mostly lies on the individual, right? The individual ultimately has to take a call on. So hopefully they don't see it as making a trade-off, right? If they have to approach somebody for a conversation, they should feel encouraged to do that. They should not feel that it hinders their career progression in any way. So all of that basics need to be put in place by the leadership, by the organization. But then ultimately the onus is on the individual, I think, to make sure that they speak up. And even if they feel that ultimately there is going to be some, I don't know, maybe some change, some impact, if it's coming at the cost of their well-being, right, it's probably not worth it. So I would say that you end up speaking up, even if you feel that it's probably not the most ideal.
As a leader, have you had any experience with, or how do you ensure that you create that culture and enabling culture, or how does ClearTrip ensure that some of those things are in place? And again, it's a journey, so no one is perfect and no organization has done it all. Otherwise, obviously things would be different. But what are some of the things which you think has worked, or would you advise to other leaders?
Yeah, so I think it's a journey, like you said, right? And I think all of us can do a lot better. Like I said earlier, I don't see too much conversation, explicit conversation around these topics even today. We started having some sessions, some workshops where people, where experts come in and we get the team to listen to them. And hopefully some of that stays, right? And people can understand that it's okay to talk about issues. But more than that, just being empathetic, right? When something does come up, how you react is very, very important. You want to be setting the right precedent. You want to make sure that you show empathy, you show an understanding, and you give whatever support the individual needs at that point of time, right? So that is, I think, something that be it myself, be it other leaders that I've seen, definitely try to do. But maybe at an institutional level, there is more that can be done. Make sure that actually these conversations happen in the first place.
Yes, and to be honest, I'm not sure how helpful workshops are. Like I think in my personal experience, it was helpful when people were like new to it. I think over 18 months now people understand the basic principles of it. And yeah, like I'm not sure what's the next step. Maybe after the workshops we should have something kind of a measurable thing. It's a hard problem to solve for an organization. Yes, there is a lot of individual influence on that, but from an organization level I sometimes wonder, what is something which we could do.
Yeah, you're right. I think, see, workshops, yeah, you're right. I think how effective they are, I think it's debatable. But at the very least, what it does is signal, right? It signals to the organization that this is something that is important for the leadership and the leadership is supportive of this. So at least it helps achieve that.
And also everybody's on a different level of awareness. So maybe that's something which, I face that in Southeast Asia because all the countries are at a very different levels of maturity. So you never know what, sometimes people need to be told 3, 4, 5 times. So there are a couple of questions around this, which I received from other people, and we'd love to know your take on it. So I'm going to read a couple of them out. And we had this conversation in another forum a little bit about how startups have the hustle culture. Now, Flipkart, ClearTrip can no longer be called the traditional startups, but I'm sure the culture is still a startup culture where you're breaking things, doing hard things, and building stuff up. And this person says, cancel the hustle culture is something which I want to do. But when everyone around me is hustling, how do I stop? And it's a little bit similar to like peer pressure in that sense, or every life stage. Now, whether it's the pressure to hustle, pressure to have kids, pressure to be successful in a certain manner, how do you think people could actually not get influenced too much by it?
Yeah, so I think, so firstly, I think hustle culture has its advantages, right? I think it leads to a lot of innovation. It leads to a lot of collaboration. It leads to people making mistakes and learning through execution, right? I think there are advantages to that. I think the problem is when people are hustling just for the sake of hustling, right? If there's a good reason why there is a hustle culture or there is a need to hustle, people, I buy into it, and I think people generally buy into it, right? If people understand why they are being hustled, why they are being pushed, why they are being asked to maybe work on a weekend for or late nights, then people understand. But if that reason is not clear, right, then it becomes a problem that, okay, there is hustle culture just for the sake of it, and I don't see the point of it. So that is something that needs to be questioned, right, at every point by every person and at every level. That, okay, is there a need for speed here, right? Then by all means, let's try and find a way to hustle people. But yes, let's ask that question first. And if the answer is no, then yes, then let's give people more space. Let's respect people's boundaries. And I think that is what every person needs to do, right? Question
And
them.
as you said earlier, that it's a lot of influence has to be individual led in terms of their own well-being and overall work-life harmony.
Yeah, and see, like you mentioned, it becomes then a larger peer pressure kind of a problem, right? That if nobody else is asking that question, or if the leaders are not really setting that example, then it is a choice that an individual has to make, and it's not a very fair choice, right? Because then you are being forced to sort of take a position which, your peers are not taking. So you have to counter peer pressure. So that's where the role of leaders becomes more important.
So another interesting one, let me read that out. I work at an early stage startup company. Any wellness program, even something as simple as a no question leave, is not being encouraged and announced openly because the business cannot afford it. Yet recently 5 people have left because they're not getting enough time with their families. As HR, I'm not sure how to drive this conversation with the founders. I think it's an interesting one, because as somebody who's custodian for people, you can see it. But again, there is always a reason to hustle in a startup because you have big ambitions and you're a small entity. How do you treat this kind of a situation?
Yeah, so I think when I think you mentioned the word of the startup can't afford it, right? I think any managers, any leaders, any founders, if they take a step back and take a longer view, right, they will understand that it becomes more expensive, more costly, right, to actually lose people if they are feeling hustled, if they are feeling burnt out. And okay, you may get that project finished 2 days earlier, but if you end up losing two of your team members and you have to hire them again and train them again, then the cost to the organization is actually far more. So I think good leaders realize that it is actually in the interest of the organization to think about the interests of the employee and the well-being of the employee. So there is no conflict there.
So coming from a CFO now, this is established, because you're looking at the numbers and you're saying it's an interest of the numbers as well that the leaders have to take care.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every time we replace people, it comes at a big cost. So no two ways about it. Absolutely endorsement.
Great. How do you define burnout? And have you ever felt that? And if yes, how did you bounce back?
Yeah, I think, it's difficult to define. I think burnout is, I would just say it's a feeling where you just want to stop, right? You don't feel the energy, feel the drive to carry on, right? Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's a little longer lasting than that. That's how I would define it. And there have been times when I felt that, and either you then change course, right? You change course. I've moved careers. A lot of people have moved careers, right? So maybe you end up doing course correction or pivot to something different. Or if it's like a temporary feeling, right? Then maybe with some rest, some recuperation, you take a break, you try to refresh yourself, and then you're able to bounce back, right? Then you can again, you come back, you can see that the larger picture makes sense for you over the medium term, over the long term, and then you can again bind.
And
so that's why having some of these breaks in between is quite important.
Pausing and breaks, yes. From your earlier experience, because you were an investment banker, private equity, you were in Goldman Sachs, and then now you're in a completely different sector for the last 6 years or so. What differences do you see from a sector point of view? Again, it's over a long period of time, but are there any things which leap out in terms of difference in how well-being is perceived across sectors?
Yeah, I think there are differences. I think in general, I think both of these sectors specifically, right? Be it investment banking, private equity, or startup technology, right? They are perceived to be very intense places, right? And so there are commonalities as well. But I think there are, I would say both in both these sectors and in general across the corporate world, right? There is more recognition, uh, both from a cost benefit analysis perspective, right? That yes, it makes sense for the organization to think about their employees' well-being, and also an awareness about mental health being a real issue that cannot be ignored anymore, right? So I think that is something that is happening across sectors. Um, I would say between the two, uh, in general, you end up working in smaller teams when you are in finance, in private equity, as compared to when you're in a corporate role, where they typically you're working with larger teams. And that helps you, at least as a leader, right, to get an understanding of a more diverse set of views and understand how to manage larger teams, where it's more likely, right, that you will end up seeing instances where these problems are real and are being faced by somebody or the other. So that is one difference that at least I have seen.
Maybe before we go to like a quick round of questions, the last one, because we talked about different sectors, what is that one thing about your sector which you wish people knew more about? And it could be related to something which will help them to take care of themselves, or just from as a leader, help them, help their performance.
See, I mean, so we always say that we are, Cleartrip is a travel company in the technology space, right? So we are a travel company that uses technology. We are travel first, and technology is an enabler. So I think the good thing about working in the travel sector is that travel is always encouraged. So anybody working here, travel is always, will never be looked down upon. So people can come, people can take breaks, people can travel. That's, I think, the lighthearted side of it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's go to the quick fire round, quick five. How do you bounce back from a disappointing meeting or an overwhelming day?
I think just again, having children to come back to, and now at least remotely, it means that you don't even have to come back to them. They are typically just hovering around you while you're doing video calls. But yeah, just
I can hear them.
I know. So I think that's very that's the most sure shot way, right? That I've felt that is very refreshing, very energizing.
Yes.
Just being with them, spending time with them, and that just takes everything away.
What is that one investment which you've made, maybe under $100, which has helped your well-being disproportionately?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, it's probably $100. I would say just the wireless earbuds, right? I think it's just allowed me to listen to things that I like when I'm running, and it has made me far more regular in going for my morning runs as compared to before. So I think since I first bought them maybe 4 or 5 years back, my first set, I've definitely become more regular. So that's an investment that's paid off.
That's an interesting one. Yes. What are one or two things just about being a leader in the post-COVID sort of era, which you feel people will be helped with, and which has worked for you?
Yeah, I think, I think we are still probably in the COVID era. I mean, hopefully we will be out of it soon. But I think it has been very, I would say, life-changing experience for a lot of people, right, on the personal side and the professional side. So it has, at least for me personally, it has helped me put things in perspective. That there are much larger things in life, much more important things in life. People have lost near and dear ones, right? So it's okay to miss a deadline. It's okay if you miss your numbers. But I think in general, getting a perspective is what I would say has been the big outcome of the last few months.
Yes, absolutely. What do you do for fun? We know you run with podcast or music, I'm guessing. What else?
Yeah, so I think that my running time is my me time. So that's definitely something I enjoy, and I try to catch up on topics of interest during that time. And then, yeah, mostly trying to spend time with the family, trying to spend time with the children. I think I find that a lot of fun. Uh, playing with my children, even watching sports with my children.
Sure. Super. If there was one question which you could ask anyone, because I'm curious about what you are curious about, what would that be, and what would you ask them?
That's a tricky one. I'll ask you actually. What is the most interesting answer you've received to this question?
Actually, I change questions for every person. So I've not had this, I've not used this a lot, but I can answer for you what I would say to that. And I would like to actually ask Hitler, and I would actually have like a conversation with Hitler and maybe do my best to figure out his mind and what he wanted to do and why he wanted to do and how we could have stopped it. Because I'm just constantly enraged by the kind of massacre he did. Yeah, it's probably not a very popular answer, but
Yeah, no, I think if you can get that insight, right? Yeah, hatred can be stopped in the world even today.
Yeah. Super. So yeah, thank you so much, Aditya, and great having a catch up and chat about these things. And I'm glad that I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And
it's been an pleasure. So thanks for having me. It's been an eye opener, right? I think even speaking about these things, right, it gets you thinking, right? So it's been very, very nice.
Thanks.